Flight attendant slaps black soldier. Her call grounds the plane. The crack of a palm against skin echoed through the narrow cabin. Plastic cups rattled on tray tables. A baby in row 12 let out a startled wail. Passengers froze mid-bite, mid-scroll, all eyes snapping to the woman in uniform standing stock still in the aisle. Staff Sergeant Olia Grant tasted blood on her inner lip. She didn't touch her face, didn't wipe away the wetness. She just stood there, boots planted on the cheap blue carpet, staring at the flight attendant in front of her. The woman's hand was still half raised, trembling. Her name tag read Megan, but the false smile had slipped now. All that perfect corporate polish dripped away, revealing something ugly underneath. Someone in row 15 gasped. A man in a business suit leaned into the aisle, his mouth hanging open. No one moved to help. Olia blinked slowly, drawing in a breath like she might on the battlefield, steadying herself behind cover, ready for the next shot. "You just struck me," she said. Her voice sounded too calm in her own ears, like it belonged to someone else. "Why?" Megan's eyes darted to the other passengers. She smoothed her navy vest, tugged at her collar, but her voice came out sharp enough to cut. "You refused to cooperate. You wouldn't move seats when instructed." Alia's eyebrows drew together. "When instructed? I'm sitting in the seat I paid for. I didn't do anything wrong." "You were aggressive." Megan raised her chin, sniffed the air like she smelled something rotten. "You threatened me." The lie dropped between them like a grenade. Olia's heart thudded once, hard enough to shake the edges of her vision. But she refused to let the rage slip out. "Not here. Not for them." Behind her, a child whispered, "Mummy, did that lady just hit the soldier?" The mother shushed the child, eyes wide and guilty. She looked away when Olia's gaze met hers. People always looked away. Olia shifted her weight, feeling the old ache in her left knee, the one that still screamed on rainy days. A souvenir from an IED she'd walked away from when her best friend hadn't. That ache grounded her now, reminded her of who she was. Staff Sergeant Olia Grant, 2nd Infantry Division, Purple Heart, 2 tours in Afghanistan, 3 for valor under fire. But none of that mattered at 30,000 feet, when a uniform only made force of you a target in a different war. The flight attendant folded her arms tight across her chest. "You can't intimidate me with your little soldier act. If you don't sit down, I'll have you removed." A snort came from across the aisle, a deep, rumbling sound. An older man in a faded Marine Corps ball cap leaned forward, his voice gravelly with age. "You ought to be ashamed of yourself," he rasped. "Girls in uniform. You slap her like she's garbage. I served too. That's no way to treat one of ours." Megan's lips pinched together, a line of pink lipstick smudged near her chin. She sneered at the old vet. "Stay out of this, sir. She's being disruptive." The old man barked a laugh. "Only thing disruptive here is your attitude, sweetheart." Olia's phone vibrated once, then again. She ignored it, folding her arms in front of her chest, mirroring Megan's stance but with iron steadiness. "Look around you." Alia sighed, her voice just loud enough for the nearby rows to hear. "I'm not the one causing a scene." She turned slightly to the rows behind her, eyes flicked away. Phones lifted discreetly. Someone was definitely filming now. Good. Let them film. Let them see. She forced her gaze back to Megan, who was glancing nervously at the cockpit door. No backup yet. No pilot stepping out to be the voice of reason. Megan cleared her throat, dropping her arms to smooth her skirt again. A nervous tick. "Sit down, or I'll have the captain divert the flight and put you on a no-fly list." Olia's laugh was soft, but it carried down the aisle like a crack of thunder. "You assaulted a decorated soldier in uniform. You think the airline's going to back you up on that?" Megan's cheeks flushed, the red creeping all the way to her ears. "No one will believe you," she snapped. "You people, you always play the victim. You people. It wasn't the slap that did it. Not really. It was that. The words that always came eventually, no matter how polite she was, how careful, how much she'd given to a country that only loved her in uniform but not in her skin." Olia heard her mother's voice, clear as day. "Baby girl, you've got to be twice as good, twice as quiet, just to stand in the same room." "Screw that." Her phone vibrated a third time, insistent now. She pulled it from her pocket. The old vet gave her a small nod, like he knew, like he'd been waiting for her to stop being polite. Olia's thumb hovered over the contact. A single name at the top of her emergency list, General David Shepard. Just she hesitated. She'd told herself she'd never pull that card, never call in favors for petty humiliations. But this wasn't petty. This was a message for every black woman who ever bit her tongue to keep her job, her reputation, her freedom. For every soldier who fought for respect and got spit on instead. She tapped the call button. Megan leaned forward, hissing so only Olia could hear. "Put that away. You're making it worse for yourself." Olia didn't flinch. The line clicked. A deep, calm voice answered on the first ring. "Grant." She could see Megan's eyes widen at the steel in that single word. "Yes, sir," Olia said, her voice steady now, all the broken pieces snapping back into place. "I'm on flight 2785, en route to Dallas. A flight attendant just struck me and is threatening to have me removed for refusing to give up my seat." A pause on the line. She pictured the general dark suit, big office, American flag on the wall. A stack of policy binders that meant nothing when real soldiers were hurting. "Stay exactly where you are," he said. "Don't say another word to her. Do you understand me, Sergeant?" "Yes, sir." He hung up without a goodbye. No need for one. She knew how this worked. Megan's face went pale, then splotchy pink. "Who did you just call?" she demanded. Olia slipped her phone back into her pocket, rolling her shoulders back as she lowered herself into her seat. The old vet across the aisle chuckled, low and full of delight. "Her boss's 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 boss," he said, winking at Megan. "You just messed up, little lady." Passengers were murmuring now, louder this time. A woman in yoga pants leaned over to the person next to her. Did she really slap her? "Oh my God, she's a soldier. Is this going to be on the news?" Olia let her eyes drift to the window. The sky beyond was blinding blue, the wing slicing through clouds like paper. Her cheek throbbed where the slap landed, but the pain was distant now, dulled by something stronger purpose. She remembered mortar fire, the dust storms, the times she'd carried grown men to medevac choppers while rounds cracked overhead. She'd earned her scars, she'd earned her voice. She wouldn't let anyone take either away. Not now, not ever. Megan turned on her heel, stomping up the aisle toward the cockpit. Her heels clacked like gunshots on tile. Somewhere up front, she'd spin her version of the story, but the damage was done. Alia's phone vibrated once more. She glanced at the screen, a single text from the general's aide. "Sit tight. We're handling it. Wheels down. Everything stops." Olia slipped the phone away and rested her head back against the seat. The old Marine leaned across the aisle, his grin wide under the shadow of his cap. "Name's Joe," he said, sticking out a knotted hand that smelled faintly of stale coffee and old leather. "Semper Fi, sister." She took it, squeezing his palm. "Hooah." He barked a laugh, surprising a giggle from a teenager sitting behind him. "What's that mean, anyway?" Olia smiled for the first time since the slap. "It means we're never out of the fight." A flight attendant, a different one, nervous young man named Luis, hurried down the aisle, eyes darting like he'd stepped into a battlefield. He hovered near Megan's jump seat, glancing back at Olia. Then, at the cockpit door, when the captain stepped out, the cabin fell silent again. He was a middle-aged man, square jaw, silver wings pinned to his uniform. He looked at Megan first. She launched into a breathless string of excuses. The captain listened, stone-faced, then turned to Olia. "Ma'am, is there a problem?" Here Olia didn't stand. She didn't need to. Her voice carried just fine. "Yes, sir. Your crew member struck me. I called my commanding officer. You'll be receiving instructions shortly." A ripple of tension pulsed through the cabin. The captain's eyes flickered to the old vet, then to the passengers with phones raised. He knew you could see it in the tight line of his mouth. He knew this wasn't going away. He lifted his radio and turned toward the cockpit. Megan sputtered behind him, her hands flailing. Olia closed her eyes for a moment, letting the hum of the engines steady her heartbeat. She didn't know exactly what the general would do. She just knew the plane wouldn't reach Dallas until someone paid for what had just happened. Sometimes justice came slowly, and sometimes it came cruising at 35,000 feet, right when you least expected it. And as the flight leveled out over the flat expanse of the Midwest, Staff Sergeant Olia Grant sat in her rightful seat, cheek still stinging, but spirit unbroken. This time, they picked the wrong woman, and she was ready to fight. Flight attendant. Slaps black soldier. Her call grounds the plane. The hum of the engines felt different now, like a drum roll before a verdict. Staff Sergeant Olia Grant sat rigid in her seat, her uniform collar scratchy against her neck, the The sting on her cheek had faded to a dull, throbbing heat, but her mind raced, louder than any pain. In row 14, the people around her shifted, restless. Every few seconds, someone's phone screen flashed in her peripheral vision. Tweets, posts, whispered side conversations. Olia could practically feel the rumor mill spinning. Who is she? Who did she call? What's going to happen? Megan hadn't returned from the front galley. Good, stay gone. The older Marine Joe was half-turned toward her, eyes twinkling under the brim of his battered cap. He leaned in just enough, so only she could hear him. Don't let M shake you, Staff Sergeant. People like that, they're termites. Eat the whole damn house down if you let M. Olia managed a small smile. Thanks, Joe. He snorted, nodding. You remind me of my daughter, tough as nails. She'd have knocked that flight attendant flat. Olia didn't say what she wanted to say. That's exactly what I wanted to do. Instead, she focused on the muted overhead chime. Ding. A signal. The plane began a slow descent. Too soon. Her phone vibrated again. She slipped it from her pocket, shielding the screen from the nosy man beside her. A new message blinked on the screen. Orders confirmed. Pilot will receive instructions. Remain calm. She read it twice. Calm. She could calm. She'd done. Calm with bullets snapping past her ear, with friends bleeding out on dusty roadsides, with parents crying over flag-draped caskets. Calm was survival. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom. So measured it sounded robotic. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing an unexpected operational delay. We've been instructed to divert our landing for an unscheduled security check. Please remain seated. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin. A hush fell. It was as if every heart on board skipped a beat in unison. Joe leaned back in his seat, chuckling under his breath. Security check. Huh, that's one hell of a check. 2. Rose up. A college kid whispered to his friend. Bro, did she just get the plane grounded? Olia folded her hands in her lap, nails pressing tiny half-moons into her palms. She refused to give the girl in the window seat next to her the satisfaction of seeing her hands shake. She'd meant what she said. She would not move, not again. Up, front, in the galley. Megan was unraveling. Luis, the junior flight attendant with big eyes and too many apologies, tried to hand her a bottle of water. Megan swatted it away, pacing in the tight space. Her hair, once neatly pinned, now frayed at the temples. This is insane, she hissed, voice low but venomous. I'm not going down for this. She provoked me. She was rude, insubordinate. Luce's eyes flicked nervously to the cockpit door. Megan, they're saying command's got involved. Military command. This isn't just a seat dispute anymore. Megan rounded on him. Whose side are you on, huh? Luis stepped back, palms raised. I'm not on a side. I'm saying you need to calm down. The captain said the airline's legal team wants statements from everyone. Her jaw twitched. She could feel her career slipping through her fingers. 5 years. 5 years of forced smiles and crying in hotel rooms, bending over backward for people who kicked her seat, snapped their fingers for peanuts, and spilled coffee in her lap. But this could be the end of it all. A voice from the jump seat. Alex, the lead purser, who'd been half listening through the crack in the cockpit door. His voice was dry, clipped. You screwed up, Megan. I told you to de-escalate. You slapped a uniformed black soldier in front of 200 passengers with smartphones. You know how this ends. Megan's throat burned. She disrespected me. No, Alex cut in. You disrespected the uniform. And you did it on camera. He didn't say and you did it to a black woman. He didn't have to. Luis looked down at the water bottle still in his hand. What do we do when we land? Alex's eyes met Megan's. We do what the airline says. And we pray this doesn't hit the news before we touch the tarmac. Too late. Olia's story was already out there. People live-streamed in. Now, the truth had wings. Faster than any jet dot. Back in row 14, the whispers grew bolder. Olia felt them like needles. Some supportive eyes soft with that performative empathy that evaporated the second you needed it. Some cold, judging. A man in a designer blazer was the first to break the silence. He leaned into the aisle, voice dripping condescension. Excuse me, Sergeant, is it? He didn't wait for her nod. You realize you're inconveniencing 200 people, right? Over a slap. Joe turned in his seat, bristling. Hey pal, nobody asked you. The man ignored him, eyes locked on Olia. You military types think you're above everyone else. You can't just run crying to your general every time you don't get your way. Aliyah met his gaze steadily. I didn't ask to be hit. He laughed, an ugly nasal sound. It's one slap. Play the victim. Get a payday, right? The woman next to him, presumably his wife, touched his arm. Mark, stop. No, he barked. I'm sick of this. She wants a payout, that's all. Joe's knuckles whitened around his armrest. Say that again, and I'll shut you up myself. Aliyah raised a hand, a tiny gesture, but enough to silence Joe before he did something that would make this even uglier. I don't want a payday, she said, her voice level. I want respect. I want people to see what happens when you think you can put your hands on someone because you feel untouchable. Mark scoffed. Oh, spare me the lecture, but his wife shushed him so sharply he flinched. Her eyes blue, wide, ashamed, met Aliyah's. I'm sorry for him, she murmured, and I'm sorry for what she did. Aliyah nodded. Once, she didn't owe them her gratitude. The seatbelt sign blinked on with a chime. The flight descended through cloud cover, the sudden turbulence tossing them side to side. Aliyah closed her eyes, bracing for landing and the storm that would follow. Her mind flickered to her mother's kitchen table, the worn edge she'd gripped as a teenager when the recruitment officer told her, "You'll have to be twice as tough, twice as smart. They won't respect you, but you'll make them." 20 years later, it still felt like the same fight. The wheels hit the tarmac with a bone-jarring thud. The captain's voice came on, neutral as ever. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain seated while security personnel assist with an onboard matter. We appreciate your cooperation." Passengers exchanged nervous glances. Phone cameras lifted again. Aliyah felt her pulse quicken, but she forced herself to stay still. You're the calm in the storm. Always. Outside her window, she glimpsed them, two black SUVs with tinted windows, flanked by a pair of white airport security trucks, not TSA, military police. She recognized the insignia, even at a distance. The plane taxied to a remote part of the airfield. Far from the crowded terminal, it stopped. Engines hummed. The cabin fell into a thick, suffocating silence. When the door cracked open, the first thing Aliyah saw was the gleam of rank pins on dress uniforms, brass that shone brighter than any airline logo. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped inside. Colonel David Shepard, the general's fixer, the one you called when politics needed a clean pair of gloves. His eyes swept the cabin once, registering the scattered whispers, the cameras, the tension thick enough to chew. His gaze found Aliyah. He nodded, just once. Behind him, a woman in a tailored suit, civilian, but with the posture of an ex-Marine, carried a folder stamped with the airline's logo. Megan, who had retreated to her jump seat near the door, shrank back as Shepard's eyes met hers. He said nothing, just studied her like she was a stain he'd have to scrub out later. He turned to Aliyah, his voice carrying down the aisle. "Staff Sergeant Grant, are you well?" She stood. Her knees ached from the flight, from the stress, but her spine stayed straight. "Yes, sir." She felt the eyes boring into her back. She didn't care. Colonel Shepard nodded. "Please gather your things. We'll escort you off this aircraft now." Megan shot to her feet, voice cracking. "This is insane. She threatened me. She's making a scene for the colonel's eyes." Cut to her, cold enough to freeze her mid-word. "Ma'am, you are not to address my soldier again." He didn't raise his voice, but the way he said "my soldier" made half the passengers sit up straighter. Aliyah felt Joe's hand on her arm, a squeeze of solidarity. "You go, Staff Sergeant. Make M feel it." She gave him a small, grateful smile. "Semper Fi." He winked. "Hooah." She stepped into the aisle. The people who'd whispered about her parted like water, eyes down. She didn't meet their gazes. They weren't the ones she came for. When she passed Megan, she stopped just long enough to let their eyes meet. "Remember this feeling," Aliyah said quietly. "Next time you think you can slap someone who fought for your right to sit on this plane." Megan flinched like she'd been slapped in return. But Aliyah didn't wait for an answer. She stepped into the bright sunlight of the jet bridge, where real consequences, and maybe real justice, waited. Flight attendant slaps black soldier. Her call grounds the plane outside the plane. The July sun blazed like a judgment light. Heat rose in waves from the tarmac as Staff Sergeant Aliyah Grant stepped onto the jet bridge, boots clicking on the metal floor. Two uniformed MPs flanked her, one tall and rail-thin, the other broad as a doorway. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. Behind them, the aircraft door hissed shut. Olia didn't look back, but she imagined Megan sitting on that jump seat, biting her nails raw, while the passengers stared holes through her polished smile. Good, let her stew. Colonel Shepard led the small convoy through a side door that bypassed the crowded terminal. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. Overhead, fluorescent lights flickered as if they were too tired to keep shining. They entered a small conference room, windowless, humming with recycled air. Olia's eyes adjusted to the dim space. Waiting inside was the woman she'd glimpsed on the tarmac, the one in the tailored grey suit. She stood at the head of a long plastic table, flipping through a thick folder stamped with the airline's logo. The colonel gestured to a chair. Sit. Olia lowered herself. Slowly, every muscle still coiled tight. The MP stood by the door, silent and immovable. Shepard stayed on his feet, hands clasped behind his back. Sergeant Grant, this is Ms. Evelyn Ross, lead counsel for the airline. Evelyn's smile was sharp, but her eyes were calculating. The kind of gaze that weighed you in dollars and headlines before you spoke a word. Staff Sergeant Grant, she said smoothly. First, on behalf of our airline, I want to extend a formal apology for what occurred on board. What you experienced was deeply regrettable and does not reflect our values. Olia said nothing. The lawyer's voice slid right over her like oil on glass. Evelyn flipped open the folder. Inside was a stack of forms, all neatly tabbed with yellow sticky notes. I want to make this right quickly, and with as little publicity as possible. You've served our country honorably. We respect that. So, here's what we're prepared to offer. She slid a single page across the table. Olia looked down at it, a check with more zeros than she'd seen in her bank account since she'd enlisted at $19,50,000. The number almost made her laugh. They thought they could slap her dignity off her face for the cost of a mid-sized sedan. Olia raised her eyes to Evelyn's. And what do you get? Evelyn tilted her head, the polite smile never wavering. We get to keep this out of the press. We get to avoid a trial that makes everyone uncomfortable. You walk away compensated. It's a win-win. Colonel Shepard's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. He wasn't here to speak for her, only to make sure she didn't stand alone. Olia tapped the paper lightly. You think this is about money? Evelyn's smile faltered just enough to show a crack. Isn't it? Olia leaned forward, her voice soft but carrying every ounce of her authority. That woman put her hands on me because she thought she could, because I'm a black woman in uniform, and she thought nobody would care. 50 grand doesn't fix that. Evelyn's eyes flicked to Shepard, then back to Olia. With all due respect, Sergeant, if this goes public, you'll be dragged through the mud too. They'll dig up every detail of your record, your medical leave, your disciplinary notes, even the false ones. Do you really want that? Olia felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Of course they'd dig. They always dug. But this time, she wasn't the one who should be afraid. She looked at the colonel. He gave her the smallest nod, permission to speak her truth. Olia drew a breath. I was on medical leave because of PTSD from my second tour. You want to spin that as unstable soldier? Go ahead. I'll spin the slap, the phone footage, the witness statements. Let's see who the world believes. Evelyn's mouth opened, but Olia wasn't done. Here's what I want, she said, her voice firm now, cutting through the recycled air. Your company issues a public apology, not buried at midnight on your website. A real one. You suspend that. Flight attendant without pay, pending an investigation. You put real diversity and anti-bias training in place for your crew. And you donate twice that check to the VA center in DC, where I get my therapy. Silence. Shepard's face didn't move, but she felt the pride rolling off him like heat. Evelyn, on the other hand, looked like someone had slapped her. Unreasonable, Evelyn said slowly. No, Olia said, pushing the check back across the table. That's the cost of my silence. Anything less, we go public, and I'll do every interview. I'll stand in front of every camera. I'll make sure every soldier, every family, every person who's ever been humiliated for the color of their skin knows exactly what your airline did. The room felt too small for her voice now. The colonel smiled faintly, just once. Evelyn's eyes darted to the MPs, as if they might swoop in to save her. They didn't flinch. She gathered the papers into her folder, the plastic binder snapping shut like a final insult. We'll review your demands. You'll hear from us within 48 hours. Olia stood, her boots scraping the tile. Make it 24 or I'll post the video myself. Outside, The air felt lighter, hot, but honest. Todd Shepard walked beside her toward the waiting black SUV, his shoes crunching over the sun-baked concrete. "You did good there," he said quietly. She lifted an eyebrow. "I didn't think you were here to compliment me." He smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him in years. "I'm not. I'm here to remind you that when this hits, they'll try to paint you as the angry black woman, the unstable vet. They'll throw everything." She nodded. "They can throw whatever they want. I'm not moving this time." The colonel's smile faded into something sharper, respect mixed with a little worry. "You're not alone, Sergeant. Don't forget that." "I won't, sir." They reached the SUV. Shepard held the door open, but before she climbed in, he cleared his throat. "One more thing. That flight attendant, Megan, she's not as clean as she looks. You might want to check your messages." Aaliyah frowned. He tapped the side of his head, an old signal from their field days. "Information is power." She settled into the back seat, the door thunking shut with finality. The driver pulled away, the terminal shrinking in the rearview mirror. When her phone buzzed again, she glanced down. It was Joe, the old Marine from the plane, sending her a video link. A new angle, not the slap this time, but the minutes before it. The argument. Megan's words, clearer than ever. "You people, you, always play the victim." Aaliyah watched it twice, her chest tightening with a familiar, furious ache. She knew how they'd spin this, but now she had proof they couldn't bury Dot. As the SUV merged onto the highway, her mind raced ahead, past the press statements, the headlines, the phony apologies. She could see the next fight coming, like a storm on the desert horizon. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about every soldier who'd been told they were too much, too broken, too black, too mouthy, too ungrateful to deserve respect. And she was ready. Flight attendant slaps black. Soldier her call grounds the plane when Staff Sergeant Aulia Grant stepped out of the black SUV. The air outside the hotel was sticky with July humidity. She paused on the curb, backpack slung over one shoulder, phone clutched tight in her palm like a weapon. She didn't dare holster. The hotel was the sort of mid-level, corporate chain that smelled of cheap air freshener and burnt coffee, but it would have to do. Her real fight was about to begin, and for once, the battlefield didn't have sand dunes or hidden snipers, just reporters, lawyers, and a truth too heavy to bury. Inside the lobby, she spotted a man waiting by the breakfast bar. Joe, the old Marine from the flight, same battered Coors cap pulled low over his eyes. He was pouring stale coffee into a styrofoam cup, like he hadn't moved in hours. When he saw her, he straightened his shoulders in that half-broken way so many old soldiers did. "They get you a room?" he asked, voice gravelly. Aaliyah managed a tired smile. "They're trying to keep me off the radar for now." Joe barked a dry laugh. "Fat chance of that. It's already on every phone in this country." He pointed to the mounted TV in the corner. The local news was looping the grainy clip of Megan's slap, spliced with blurry cell phone shots of Aaliyah sitting in her seat, stone-faced, refusing to move. The headline crawled across the screen. "Airline faces backlash after soldier allegedly assaulted on flight." Aaliyah's chest tightened. Allegedly. That word always did so much damage for so little effort. Joe followed her eyes, snorted. "They'll twist it every way they can, but people are pissed. Trust me." Aaliyah looked at him. "Why are you still here, Joe?" He tapped the brim of his cap. "Marine Corps rule. Don't leave your people behind. And you, kid, you're my people now." Something warm pressed against the cold edge in her ribs. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone to stand with her, not just above her, not just beside her when the cameras were rolling, but truly with her. They rode the elevator together, in silence. On the 4th floor, she found her room, a bland box of beige wallpaper and stiff bedsheets. Joe waited in the hallway while she unlocked the door, then slipped inside behind her, like an old guard dog refusing to sleep outside. She tossed her backpack on the bed, sank down beside it. For a moment, she just stared at the TV she'd left on mute. More coverage, more talking heads, more pundits dissecting her life, without once asking her what it felt like to have a palm collide with her cheek because of the color of her skin. Joe lowered himself into the desk chair, knees cracking. "Have you talked to the colonel yet?" "Not today," Aaliyah said, pressing her thumb against her temple. "But the lawyer texted. They want me to settle. Again, twice the offer now." Joe laughed so hard he started coughing. "They think you'll roll over. Ain't that cute?" She didn't answer. Her eyes drifted to her phone. The battery icon was a sliver of red. She plugged it in and watched it blink to life like a lifeline. An hour later. The knock on her door startled them both. Joe's hand went to the old marine knife clipped inside his boot. Old habits never died. Olia put a hand on his shoulder. Easy, Marine. She cracked the door just wide enough to see a familiar face. Evelyn Ross, the airline lawyer, flanked by a young man in a navy suit who looked like he'd been sweating bullets all day. Staff Sergeant, Evelyn said, her tone syrupy sweet. May we come in? Joe snorted behind her. Look at M. Like wolves sniffing for an open wound. Olia stepped back. Make it quick. Evelyn swept inside, the young man trailing her like a nervous puppy. She didn't bother to sit. She laid a thick folder on the tiny round table by the window. We've reviewed your demands, Evelyn began, voice tight. We can meet. Most of them. Olia crossed her arms. Most. Evelyn gave her a look that was almost pitiful. The public apology is being drafted. The donation, the board is discussing the amount. The suspension. Done. But you'll need to sign a non-disclosure. No interviews, no social media. This ends quietly. Joe's laugh was more bark than humor. Quiet for who? You think you can pay her to shut up after you let that bigot smack her in front of 200 witnesses? Evelyn's smile cracked. No one is denying what happened. But the company needs to protect its reputation. Protect your reputation. Olia cut in, voice low, shaking with a rage she'd tried so hard to bury. I'm not the one who needs protection. I'm the one who's done being polite. Evelyn's puppy lawyer shifted uneasily, flipping open the folder to a page of neatly typed clauses. Look, Staff Sergeant, this is a good deal. You'll never have to work again. Olia felt the words like a slap. You think this is about money? I served this country. My brothers died for it. I'll be damned if I let you sweep this under a rug so your CEO can keep his Christmas bonus. Joe grinned so wide his eyes crinkled. Now that's the soldier I saw on that plane. Evelyn snapped the folder shut. Then you leave us no choice. We'll fight this in court. It could take years. They'll drag up everything. Your PTSD, the incident with your superior officer. Olia's blood ran cold. That old stain she'd worked so hard to bury. The one where a captain had pushed her too far, cornered her in a supply room, and she'd nearly broken his jaw defending herself. Evelyn leaned in, voice soft. You want the world to see that. Olia's hands clenched into fists, but Joe leaned forward, his growl low and lethal. Lady, you think that scares her? We've all got scars. Difference is, hers are clean. He jabbed a finger at the lawyer's chest. Go tell your bosses they're poking a pit bull. And when this blows up on the 6 o'clock news, your fancy stock prices won't mean squat. After they left, suits clicking down the hallway like retreating rats, Olia sat down on the bed, head in her hands. The walls pressed closer. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. Joe eased himself onto the bed beside her, shoulder to shoulder. His voice dropped to a gentle rumble. You don't have to do this alone, you know. Olia's laugh was hollow. Who else is going to stand with me when they drag up every mistake I ever made? Joe's eyes twinkled. Me, and you know, who else? He held out his phone. It was blowing up with new notifications. He turned the screen so she could see messages from people all over the country. Vets, nurses, single moms, even flight crew from other airlines, saw what they did to you. Standing with you. My sister wore that uniform too. She'd be proud. Don't you dare back down. We need you to fight. Olia's throat tightened. She'd been trained to push through fear, to silence her pain. But no drill sergeant had ever taught her how to stand still and let people stand beside her. Later that night, her phone buzzed again. Olia sat alone in the dark, the cheap desk lamp casting shadows across the notepad where she'd scribbled. A plan, contacts, press outlets, hashtags that might get her story out there before the airline could bury her under legal threats. The message was from an unfamiliar number, a woman's name, Naomi Carter, journalist for a major cable network. Saw the video. I want your side, unedited. I'll protect your voice. Are you ready? Olia stared at the screen, pulse racing. Once she said yes, there'd be no hiding. They'd peel her open, her past, her therapy, her nightmares. But they'd also see her truth. Joe's words echoed in her mind. You ain't alone. She typed one word in reply. Yes. The next morning she met Naomi in the tiny lobby cafe. Naomi was young but carried herself. like she'd been dodging spin doctors her whole life. Her hair was in neat braids, her eyes sharp and kind all at once. She placed her phone on the table between them, recording light blinking red. "Why now?" Naomi asked. "Why not just take the money and disappear?" Olia looked out the window, at the people coming and going, dragging suitcases to cabs that would take them to new beginnings. "Because it's not just about me," she said, voice steady, despite the tremor in her gut. "It's about every black woman who's ever been told to sit down and shut up. Every soldier who gave this country their life, only to be told they don't deserve basic respect." She leaned forward, eyes locking with Naomi's. "They think I'll run from this, but I'm not moving this time. Let them come." By the afternoon, her interview hit the network's website. The video spread like a wildfire in dry brush. Millions of views in hours. Hashtags trended. Vets from every branch spoke up. A group of retired officers demanded the airline's board resign. Megan's face appeared in memes captioned, "You people." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Olia's phone buzzed one last time that night. A message from an unknown contact. She opened it and froze. A short video clip, grainy but unmistakable. Megan, on a different flight, months earlier, yelling at an elderly Hispanic woman, grabbing her arm, shoving her into her seat. Another victim. Alia felt something crack, open inside her chest, not fear this time, but something sharper. This wasn't an accident. This was a pattern. Joe stepped up beside her, reading the message over her shoulder. He let out a low whistle. Well, looks like that wolf just got caught with a mouthful of feathers." Olia exhaled, her rage turning clean and focused. She did this before. Who knows how many more? Joe clapped her shoulder. "Then you show M. You drag it all into the sun." And for the first time since she tasted blood on her lip in seat 14B, Olia smiled. The hunt was on. Flight attendant slaps black soldier. Her call grounds the plane the next morning. Olia woke to find the world watching her. Her phone screen was a battlefield of news alerts and missed calls. Messages pinged in faster than she could read. Soldiers she hadn't seen in years. Old drill sergeants. Strangers who said they'd seen her face and felt braver for it. One headline caught her eye. Bold, red, unforgiving. Airline suspends flight attendant after viral assault video. More victims speak out. The article quoted two other passengers, the elderly Hispanic woman from the new clip, and a young single father who said Megan had humiliated him and his toddler mid-flight. They'd been too scared to report it. Until now. Olia sat on the edge of the stiff hotel bed, phone clutched so tight her knuckles ached. The sun outside the window glowed pale gold. A new day. But she felt as if she hadn't slept in weeks. Joe's gravelly voice pulled her back. "You see this?" He was leaning against the wall by the TV, watching the newsfeed on loop. "They're scared now. I bet half their board is on damage control calls right this second." Olia scrubbed a hand over her face. "Yeah, and what about me? They'll come for me next, Joe. They'll dig for anything they can spin." Joe crossed the room in 2 stiff steps, dropped into the chair across from her. He pulled a folded envelope from his jacket, yellowed and dog-eared. "When I got back from Nam, they tried to break me, too. You know why they didn't?" Olia raised an eyebrow. "Because you're too damn stubborn." Joe barked a short laugh. "Because my brothers wouldn't let them." "You've got more brothers and sisters than you know, Staff Sergeant. We ain't gonna let you fall." A soft knock at the door interrupted him. Olia tensed, but Joe just jerked his chin. "It's Shepard. I texted him." She opened the door to see Colonel Shepard in his pressed uniform, phone to his ear. He ended the call as he stepped inside. He gave Joe a brief nod, an old warrior acknowledging another. Then he looked at Olia, gaze sharp but warm beneath the steel. "Staff Sergeant," he said, "are you ready for what comes next?" Olia lifted her chin. "Depends. Are they ready?" They moved down to the hotel's small conference room, beige walls, buzzing overhead lights, and 2 stale coffee urns set up like a peace offering. But there was no peace to be had today. Inside were 2 young lawyers in cheap suits. Evelyn Ross, the airline's stone-cold legal rep, was nowhere to be seen. Instead, these 2 looked fresh out of law school, shuffling papers like they were auditioning for a courtroom drama. Colonel Shepard stood behind Olia's chair, arms folded. Joe took the seat next to her, feet planted wide like he dared them to try anything. One of the young lawyers cleared his throat. "Staff Sergeant Grant, our client, the airline, wishes to reiterate their regret over what you experienced. They're prepared to increase their offer substantially. He slid a paper across the table. The figure on it made Joe's eyebrows jump. Olia didn't flinch. They think throwing money at me will shut this down. The lawyer gave her a brittle smile. Public attention fades fast. Sergeant, take this, move on with your life. If you keep pushing, well, it gets messier for everyone. Shepard's voice cut through the stale air like a blade. Is that a threat, son? The young man paled. No, sir, just a fact. If this escalates, your client's personal life will be front-page news. You have PTSD claims, an old disciplinary record, an altercation with a superior. This will hurt your credibility. Olia felt the old ache in her stomach, the one they always aimed for. Like a bruise they never let heal. She saw Joe shift beside her, ready to unleash hell, but she lifted her hand. I'm not moving this time. She leaned in, voice calm, words clipped and deadly. You want to drag my scars into the light? Fine, but we'll drag yours too. You knew Megan had complaints against her, didn't you? You kept her flying. How many passengers did she humiliate because you looked the other way? The lawyer's face flickered a moment of naked panic before the mask returned. Ollie pressed harder. I've got statements now. Video. People coming forward every hour. You really want this to go to trial? Let's see what the jury thinks of an airline that covers for a serial abuser. Shepard's hand dropped to her shoulder, steady, warm. She's not bluffing. The lawyer swallowed, glancing at his partner. Papers shuffled. Words died in their throats. Joe cracked his knuckles, voice low. Try your best, boys. We ain't scared of the dirt. Dirt's where flowers grow. After the so-called meeting, they walked out into the sweltering parking lot. Olia paused beside Shepard's car, her mind buzzing with 100 threats and 100 more doubts. Shepard leaned against the hood, looking at her like the girl he'd recruited all those years ago, the one who'd stood at her mother's kitchen table and said, I want to matter. You did good there, he said, but they're not done fighting dirty. Are you ready for the next hit? Olia crossed her arms. I'm tired, sir, but I'm ready, he smiled. Just a little. That's all I needed to hear. Joe stepped between them, holding up his phone. I got word from Naomi, that reporter friend of yours. She wants you on the evening broadcast tonight. Full story, raw. Are you sure you want this? Once it's out, there's no crawling back into the dark. Olia took the phone, staring at her own reflection in the black glass. No crawling back. No hiding the scars or the nightmares, or the way people looked at her when she walked through the terminal in uniform, as if she was something to be managed. Silenced, packed away like unwanted cargo. She looked up, meeting both men's eyes. I'm done hiding. Let them see. That night, the TV studio lights felt hotter than the desert sun. Naomi Carter sat across from her, eyes wide and unflinching, letting Olia tell it all. The slap, the threats, the hush money, the discovery of Megan's pattern. Every word felt like pulling barbed wire out of her chest. The camera's red light stayed steady. Her heartbeat did not. Naomi's last question was the one that hit deepest. If you could say one thing to every little black girl, every soldier, every person who's been silenced, what would it be? Olia's throat closed, but the words were there, waiting. Don't ever move just because they tell you to, she said, her voice shaking but clear. Stand your ground. Make them see you. Make them remember. The broadcast went viral before she even got back to the hotel. Olia sat on the edge of her bed, phone vibrating like an angry hornet in her hand. Her social feeds were a mess. Thousands of comments, some hateful, some full of love. All proof that people were listening. Joe sat cross-legged on the floor, sorting through piles of printed statements from new witnesses. You're a movement. Now, Staff Sergeant, you realize that? She gave a dry laugh. Didn't exactly plan on it. Joe shot her a grin. History doesn't ask for permission. It just shows up. Shepard's voice crackled through the speakerphone on the desk. He sounded more tired than she'd ever heard him. We got confirmation the airline's board is voting on whether to terminate Megan outright. Internal emails are leaking. They're scared. Olia's eyes narrowed. Good. They should be. But just as hope started to feel real, the first crack in her armor came. Joe was the first to see it. An email buried in her inbox. Sent from a blocked address. Subject line, we know. Attached, blurry photos. Olia, years ago, at a base in Kandahar, half drunk on her birthday, laughing with her squad. But they'd been edited. Text slapped across her face. Unstable. violent, not fit to serve. Joe hissed through his teeth, dirty bastards. They're gonna spin it like you're a loose cannon. Shepard's voice over the speaker went ice cold. They're desperate. Means you're winning. But Olia felt the old fear twist in her gut. Not for herself, she'd survive. But what about her mother, her nieces? Would they drag her family into the spotlight too? Joe touched her wrist. Don't you let this shake you. Truth still truth. She forced herself to look at the images again, the fake captions, the lies, and she felt it. Not fear this time, but rage so clean it felt like clarity. They want a war, she murmured. They got one. Hours later, her phone pinged, with another message, a single line from an anonymous source. Check your voicemail. She's not done yet. Olia's heart thundered. She pulled up the message, thumb trembling. Megan's voice poured through the speaker, crackling with hate. A recording, probably a butt dial, or maybe a threat meant for someone else. She thinks she can ruin me. That soldier, B***********, I don't know who I know. We can make her disappear, like all the others. They'll blame her PTSD. She's unstable, easy to bury. The words stabbed into Olia's chest like ice picks, but the twist was deeper. All the others. Joe's eyes widened. Who else? Kid. Who else did she threaten? Shepard's voice thundered from the phone. Get me that recording. Now. We're blowing this wide open. In that moment, Olia knew this wasn't just about her anymore, and maybe it never had been. It was about every voice that got silenced, every seat someone was told to move from, every slap that went unpunished. She looked out the hotel window, where the city lights flickered like embers ready to ignite. This was her last stand, and she wouldn't stand alone. Flight attendant slaps black soldier. Her call grounds the plane. The day she decided to end it for good, Olia woke before the sun. She hadn't slept much. Too many thoughts kept her eyes open. Old desert nights in Kandahar. Her mother's proud tears at basic training. Her brother's names carved into marble at Arlington. The sting of Megan's palm on her face. But mostly, she thought of every person who'd messaged her. The nurses, the janitors, the grandmothers, the tired soldiers who'd whispered, "Don't stop fighting." She rose quietly, careful not to wake Joe, who was snoring like a bear in the chair. In the bathroom mirror, her reflection stared back, puffy eyes, a bruise fading along her jaw, the strong line of her shoulders unbroken. One last stand. By mid-morning the hotel lobby was buzzing with reporters. Naomi Carter was waiting in the corner, eyes scanning the crowd like a hawk. When she saw Olia, she moved fast, voice low but urgent. They're voting this morning. If the board removes Megan, they'll announce it before noon. But the smear campaign's still rolling. I found a troll farm account. They're buying fake witnesses too. Call you unstable. Aaliyah nodded, unsurprised. They'll drag me down if they can't buy me. Naomi squeezed her shoulder. I want you on the air live when the vote comes out. They'll have to face you. Joe, now awake and bristling like an old bulldog, tossed Naomi a USB stick, got the voicemail. The whole thing, Megan threatening to bury people. You get that to your producers. Already did. Naomi flashed a grin. They're scared, but they should be. An hour later, they were back in the tiny conference room. This time, Colonel Shepard sat at her side in uniform, a physical reminder that the army didn't forget its own. Naomi stood behind the camera, crew as they went live, no fancy backdrop, just a battered room, and a woman too tired to fake anything anymore. Olia's voice didn't shake as she looked into the camera. When I boarded that plane, I was tired. I didn't want trouble. I just wanted to get home to my family. But one woman decided I didn't deserve respect, because of my skin, because of my uniform, because she thought she could. She paused. Naomi gave her a tiny nod. Keep going. They tried to shut me up. They offered money, lies, and threats. But this isn't just my story. I have proof Megan did this before. 2 mothers, 2 old women, 2 kids. And the airline let her keep flying. Joe lifted his phone, reading the statement from the anonymous whistleblower. Megan's uncle was a regional VP. Complaints were buried. Records lost. Olia felt her pulse drum in her ears. This ends now. If you've ever been silenced, stand up. Don't move when they tell you to. We won't sit at the back. We won't take the slap and swallow it. She looked straight down the lens, like she was staring into every living room in America. I won't move this time, and neither should you. When the vote came through, it was anticlimactic. Naomi's phone buzzed. She read the message, eyes wide. She's gone. Megan's out. And the VP who protected her resigned. The airline board's begging for a meeting. They want you to help build their new policy. Joe hooted so loud the camera crew jumped. Shepard just grinned, the closest thing to pride Olia had ever seen on the old man's granite face. But Olia didn't smile right away, because this wasn't about a single slap anymore. She met with the airline executives that afternoon, but on her terms. No cheap settlement, no non-disclosure. Instead, she made them promise money for real bias training, a new hotline for passengers and crew to report abuse, and public funds to the VA clinic that still stitched her mind back. Together on bad days. Shepard, standing beside her in his dress blues, leaned in as they signed the paperwork. You know you're gonna get hate for this. People will say you did it for attention, or for the payout. Olia rolled her eyes. They always say something. Joe grinned behind them. Let em talk. We know the truth. 2 days later, she stood at her mother's porch in DC, a duffel bag slung on her shoulder, boots still dusty. Her mother, tiny but fierce, opened the door and grabbed her before she could step inside. You come home with your head up, girl? Her mother asked against her shoulder. Aaliyah's eyes burned. Yeah, mama, I did. Her mother pushed her back just enough to see her eyes. Then you did right. Months passed. The hashtags faded, but the changes didn't. Airlines scrambled to review old crew complaints. Megan vanished. Rumors said she'd lawyered up, but found no takers. The hush money dried up when the big dogs ran scared. Olia's phone stayed busy. She gave talks to other soldiers, veterans with too many scars to name. She sat with girls who'd been told, your voice doesn't matter. She reminded them, you don't have to move just because they tell you to. Joe stayed close, a grumpy guardian angel who swore too much and told war stories to every kid in the neighborhood. Shepard visited sometimes, bringing news of her old squad, her brother's medals, the ones she carried for them when she needed strength. One evening, long after the headlines had cooled, Olia sat alone on the porch, dusk folding the sky into shades of purple and gold. She thought of the slap, how small it seemed now, yet how big the wound had been, how it wasn't just Megan's hand, but every hand that had ever pushed her to the back, told her to stay quiet, stay grateful, stay invisible. She was none of those things anymore. Her mother called through the screen door, you coming in, baby? Olia smiled. In a minute, she closed her eyes, felt the summer breeze on her cheek where Megan's slap had once burned, and she whispered to herself, for the girls who'd come after her. For every soldier fighting a war no one could see, sometimes you have to lose your seat to claim your ground. She opened her eyes. She was still standing, and she was never moving again. The end.